am the Augusta Baker Endowed Chair at the School of Information Science at the University of South Carolina, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second annual Augusta Baker Lecture featuring Dr. Zetta Elliott. And just so you all know, and we can certainly push more links to you, Augusta Baker was a legendary Black librarian who spent a great deal of her career at the New York Public Library, breaking barriers and glass ceilings and really having such an impact on the field of librarianship and also children's literature and publishing, and also did an amazing level of social justice work to improve the quality of the literature that our young children of color are reading and seeing themselves in. And in that vein, we are having this lecture every year to celebrate her legacy of social justice, children's literature, diversity, and of course, storytelling. So before I get started, just want to give you some housekeeping. Hopefully you saw the looped PowerPoint that was happening. We are very fortunate to have ASL interpreters with us. And so if that would be a help to you, we are asking that you go to the box where they are and click on the three dots and you can actually pin them. So therefore they'll stay on your screen. So we have Katie, who is with us right this minute, and then Larissa will rotate with Katie. And their names are being put into the chat box. And this is being recorded. And so we will certainly send out follow-up links so you can revisit this wonderful presentation and please share it with your friends, network, students, etc. And probably next week, the next couple of weeks, but we will certainly let you know when the recording is available. And finally, I just want to acknowledge what we're calling Team Baker. The work that we do at the University of South Carolina is definitely a team effort, and I'm blessed to have a really wonderful team, including Christine Sheelick, Liz Hartnett, Valerie Bird Fort, Michaela Baker Taylor, Rebecca Friedman, Brittany Lee, and also we have several alumni who are just ardent supporters and really make this work easier to do and certainly worthwhile as well. So I just want to acknowledge the village that helped us make this presentation possible tonight and the work that we do all year long. And finally, and last but not least, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Dr. Michelle Martin, who will be introducing our esteemed speaker. And not that Michelle is not also our esteemed guest as well. So Dr. Michelle Martin is the Beverly Cleary Endowed Professor for Children and Youth Services in the Information School at the University of Washington. And before Michelle became the Beverly Cleary Endowed Professor, she was the Augusta Baker Endowed Chair here at South Carolina. So I have big shoes to fill in terms of Michelle and Augusta, and grateful to be in such wonderful company. And so happy birthday, Doc Martin. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Can you hear me? And thanks so much for inviting me to introduce Zetta Elliott, one of my favorite people in the world. I'm out here in Seattle. We have sun. We don't get it as much as you are in South Carolina, so I hope my internet will behave because I'm determined to stay out here, despite the pollen that Nancy Tolson does not like. Dr. Zetta Elliott is an award-winning feminist writer and poet who has authored over 24 books for young readers. Her picture book poem, A Place Inside of Me, illustrated by Noah Denman, earned a 2021 Caldecott honor. We are so excited about that. Born and raised in Ontario, Canada, Elliott has lived in the US for over 20 years. She started reading and writing stories at an early age to cope with her own life experiences, and now writes the books she wished she had had as a child. She believes that a writer can profoundly impact a child's understanding and experience of the world, and we all know that's true. Her work centers the lives of Black children because growing up, she felt invisible, not only to the outside world, but also in the realm of the imaginary, and what Ebony Thomas tells us has a long history on that. As a result, Zetta has written many fantasy novels for middle grade and young adult readers, stories that tackle conventions and inspire a new generation of fantasy writers from all backgrounds. She's currently working on the third book in the Dragon series, which I am eagerly awaiting, titled The Witch's Apprentice. An advocate for greater diversity and equity in publishing, and I think advocate is probably an understatement. Elliott has self-published many of her own works in her own imprint, Rosetta Press. She established this press in the tradition of Black feminist writers who started their own presses after being excluded from publishing. The name Rosetta comes from her grandmother, for whom Elliott is named. Zetta has been a guest speaker in probably most of my classes over the last 10 or 12 years, and always teach her work. So I'm so grateful to be having this introduction, and also to recognize so many faces and names on the screen. So I want to give a warm welcome to Zetta Elliott.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Michelle and Nicole. And happy birthday, Michelle. Everybody say happy birthday because it's her birthday. What a gift to me that on your birthday, you would take time out to introduce me and to attend this lecture. So good evening from Evanston, Illinois. Thank you for joining us on a Friday night. I want to begin by thanking Nicole and Team Baker in the Richland Library. I'm really honored to be invited to give the second Augusta Baker Lecture. And what I'm going to try to do is to break my presentation into two parts. I confess I did not know much about Augusta Baker before this lecture. And so I am very much looking forward to the picture book biography that will be coming out from Brianna McDaniel, I think in the next year or two. I did do a little digging and was happy to discover that I have a couple of things in common with Ms. Baker. I too was raised by two school teachers, and I also inherited my love of storytelling from my grandmothers. So I am going to share my screen with you. So if you could just give me a moment, and I apologize in advance for any technical difficulties that might happen. All right, that looks good so far. I am going to minimize this. All right. Sometimes the axe is the cure. Poetry as balm and blade in the Black Lives Matter era. Okay, so does it let me do this? Nope. Is there? Nope, that did it. I'm just trying to figure out how to advance. There we go. All right, thank you. So I hoped that I could tell you a compelling story this evening, but this has been a difficult week. It's been a difficult month. It has been a very difficult year. You've likely heard about the police killing of Dante Wright in Minnesota, and you've probably also heard about the police killing of Adam Toledo here in Chicago. But you may not have heard of Caden Swan, the toddler who was shot in the head during a road rage incident here in Chicago last week. And we don't know all the names of the millions of victims around the world who are suffering from what the UN calls the shadow pandemic of violence against women and girls. And of course, just this morning, I woke up to news of another mass shooting in neighboring Indiana. It's National Poetry Writing Month, and so I have committed to writing a poem a day until the end of April. This is my third year doing it. I highly recommend it if you want to give it a try. Some days, all I can manage is a haiku, and I tried several variations on this one. Why not leave the flag at half-staff? Why bother to raise it anymore? Why not leave the flag at half-staff since massacres happen every day? Why not leave the flag at half-staff since tomorrow's massacre is near? Why not leave the flag at half-staff and admit we never stop mourning? I'm glad Nicole asked me to submit a title for my talk last fall, because if I wrote it this week, there would certainly be more blade than balm. I'm angry, but I'm also weary, not just of the continuous killing, but of writing about it when I know mere words won't make it stop. But I'm aiming for balance in this lecture, just as I do in my writing and in my life. These haiku from Say Her Name encapsulate the tension, I think, between balm and blade. Balm, take your sister's hand, twine your fingers between hers, face the world as one. Young, gifted, and Black, willing to sacrifice all to see justice done. I woke up like this, fierce, focused, and ready to fight for my people. And then there's the blade. Indictments are rare, like snow in the Sahara or cops behind bars. Innocence belongs to other people's children. Ours are born condemned. Stop killing us. Stop killing us. Stop killing us. Stop killing us. Stop. For my presentation, I will be reading and reflecting on poems from Say Her Name and my second collection, American Phoenix. I will also share some more recent work before asking you to join me in a writing activity at the end of my talk. So please make sure you have a pen and some paper ready. And a content note, I will be talking about suicide a little later on. Once I settled on a title for my talk, this photo immediately came to mind. And of course, I have to give a shout out to a special librarian, Crystal Brunel. When I posted on Facebook that I couldn't find the source of this photograph, she, of course, put a few hours of labor in and found the photographer's name for me. He's Italian. As Michelle pointed out, I was named after my paternal grandmother, whose short life began and ended in the Caribbean. We never met, and I don't have a photograph of her. The first Zetta Elliott supposedly died in a mental asylum in Antigua in the 1950s. But before she was institutionalized, Zetta worked as a laborer, as did her mother, Eliza. I suspect they would have known how to handle a machete, and I imagine that as they worked alongside one another cutting sugarcane, they might have looked more like sisters, not being very far apart in age. All of that is speculation, of course. I don't know what traits I might have inherited from my father's mother. Mental illness runs on both sides of my family, but I don't blame any of my ancestors for my depression and anxiety. I prefer to think of these disorders as tools with which I have learned how to shape a kind of life, to borrow a phrase from Lucille Clifton. I hope my ancestors, and Zetta in particular, can see in me what I see in these two women: hard workers, fierce warriors, proud Black women who know they are stronger when they align themselves with those who share their mission. Augusta Baker's advice for storytellers resonates with me and serves, I think, as a fitting caption for this photo. Select well, prepare well, and then go forth, stand tall, and just tell. My role as a Black feminist poet is to testify. I write both to document and defend a reality that is too often distorted or dismissed altogether. But as someone who has worked with youth for over 30 years, I know that I also embody possibility. I don't primarily identify as a poet, and at times struggle with imposter syndrome, but I believe that poetry is for everyone, and I publish my work to prove to others that it can be done. I am not an expert. I still have a lot to learn, but I write poetry in an effort to heal myself and to serve others who may be searching for comfort in a chaotic world. Last week, I was invited to give a reading at a small private college in Pennsylvania. I presented for 2 classes and was enthusiastically received by the students. But the evening reading was not well attended. I don't generally draw a big crowd, and I have certainly delivered more than one paper at an academic conference where there were more people on the panel than in the audience. But I think my hosts were embarrassed by the low turnout, and that made me feel bad. I'm not particularly invested in clicks or clicks with a Q. As I wrote in one of my poems in Say Her Name, popularity has never been my priority. But an author today can't expect to be an influencer without attracting thousands of followers on social media. It's National Poetry Month, so I feel some pressure to post poems on my various accounts, and many of my poems, unfortunately, remain relevant as more and more Black people fall victim to police violence. But I worry that sharing my work will seem as though I'm just trying to sell books. Invariably, I opt to post nothing at all. I do continue to write, however, and after that Pennsylvania reading, I met my daily quota for NaPoWriMo by penning this haiku. Sow your seeds as if the harvest is guaranteed to be bountiful. Writers, like teachers, are sowing seeds, and we don't always know when we have touched the hearts and minds of those around us. At the end of that reading, an elderly white man asked, "How do you remain hopeful?" I had concluded my presentation with a read aloud of my picture book, A Place Inside of Me, and the man said it was clear that I was intentional about centering optimism in my work. I wanted to tell him the truth, and so I admitted that some days I'm not hopeful at all. But I added, I work with children. I serve children. So despair is a luxury I can't afford. If I didn't work with children, I probably would have left this country a long time ago. Just before the pandemic began, I finally took the plunge and applied for US citizenship. Last month, I passed my citizenship test, but if I had my swearing in ceremony today, I think I might choke on that oath. I was born and raised in Canada, but I've now lived in the US for most of my life. When I first arrived back in 1994, my friends in Brooklyn used to call me Pollyanna. I think of myself as a realist, but admit I used to be more sanguine when writing about my immigrant experience. My father opened the door that let me shape a kind of life here in the US, and he tried, in his way, to prepare me for the challenge of being Black in America. This poem was first published in Show Us Your Papers. American. My father was a registered alien. I laughed until I became one too. He's gone now, but I still walk with my passport, my green card, my birth certificate, my driver's license, and my social security card. Because I have never forgotten my father's words. You are not American. In the 60s, my father was one of 2 Black students at a Bible college in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He followed their advice and stayed away from the protesters who were fighting for his rights. Don't be a troublemaker. That's what my father said to me. Remember, you are not American. What he meant was, you will never be American, not the way they are American. But I am American, always have been and always will be. I am also my father's daughter, so I know that even with ID, they may still come for me and fling me back into the briar patch. But my blood mingles old worlds and new. I skip like a stone between hemispheres, and making trouble is an impulse I won't deny. I am American, after all. I included this poem in my second collection of poetry, American Phoenix, which I self-published last October. Another poem in that book is called Home. Written last year, it expresses my gratitude and commitment to this nation, though it has yet to quote, rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. Home. I don't have to be here. I could take your irate advice and go back where I came from. But this is the home of my heart, which I chose when I was so desperate to belong that no risk was great enough to keep me from crossing the border in search of the very life I'm living now. I really don't have to be here. I've got papers from other countries that could open doors in other corners of the world, but I choose to stay because the debt that I owe is too great to forgive. You don't love someone for who they have been. You commit because despite their flaws, you already love the person they may someday become. I never had the pleasure of meeting Augusta Baker, but I have a beloved elder friend librarian in my life who's here this evening. She is also a wonderful storyteller and sharer of resources. And now that I live in Chicagoland, we are neighbors as well. Seisha listened to my doubts about becoming a citizen and offered this loving assurance. Being alive and aware of the shoulders on which I'm standing proves that our existence here is necessarily resourceful, change-making, and impactful. Your presence, Zetta Elliott, in these not so united states is so important to so many. Your US citizenship here was the right step towards making the very difference the world needs right now. You are exactly where you are supposed to be, where our Creator placed you, and she has her eyes on you. No regrets. Stay. Seisha's gracious words made me think of poet Amanda Gorman's mantra. I am the daughter of Black writers. We are descended from freedom fighters who broke their chains and changed the world. They call me. They call me too. I surround myself with photographs of my ancestors so I won't forget the debt I owe to those who fought to leave this country and those who fought to stay. Amanda's brilliant inauguration performance of The Hill We Climb in that bold yellow coat felt like a ray of sunshine after years of doom and gloom. The title of my talk, Sometimes the Axe is the Cure, is the final verse of a poem I wrote the day after Joe Biden was declared the winner of the federal election last November. I was walking downtown and folks in Evanston were celebrating with socially distanced car caravans. I smiled at their waving flags and honking horns and triumphant fists raised in the air and tried to allow them and myself at least one afternoon of relief, if not outright joy. Living with anxiety makes it challenging to stay in the present moment. There's always a finger poking you in the shoulder, urging you to prepare for what might be around the corner. James Baldwin famously declared that to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all of the time. Being Black in this country also means bracing yourself for the next blow, because it's definitely coming. It's hard to be open to joy in that hypervigilant state. When President Obama was first elected, I celebrated for about 30 seconds before praying aloud, please, God, don't let them kill him or the family. My students in Massachusetts at the time were streaking naked across the quad, but when they came to class the next morning, they sobered up fast when I asked them to tell me one thing that had changed. I doused their joy in that moment. And though I could argue that history proved me right, I have since tried to allow people their illusions and to make more room for joy in my own life. Last fall, I noticed tar spots on the leaves of many maple trees in my neighborhood. A little online investigating revealed they were caused by a type of fungus that could spread, but ultimately wouldn't kill the tree. Let hope blaze. Let hope blaze like the brassiest leaves, fanned gold and resplendent against the blue sky. Let my eye linger only on beauty and not on the blight that mars each saffron star. Today I can ignore the lessons life's taught me, for now I can choose not to dwell on the rot. In silence, I will honor the glory of autumn, knowing that sometimes the axe is the cure. For me, the blight on the leaves served as a metaphor for the problems plaguing our country. Joe Biden's win was enough for many voters. It removed the previous occupant of the White House and gave Democrats 2 to 4 years to undo all the damage. But it was clear to me long before the election that simply replacing Republicans with Democrats wouldn't save the nation. Just as recruiting more Black officers won't end police violence, and hiring Black interns won't bring equity to the publishing industry. A balm can soothe irritation and help a wound to heal, but when a wound becomes infected or the disease spreads, more drastic action is required. Yet look what happens when Black women activists like Angela Davis or Mariam Kaba dare to say, abolish the police or abolish prisons, not reform or defund, end it altogether because the corruption is so complete, there really is no cure. I don't always feel safe wielding my words as a blade designed to defend, but also discipline and sometimes destroy. I used to write just 1 or 2 poems a year when the rage I felt at the state of the world made prose impossible. My 2 contributions to the 2007 anthology, The Ringing Ear, Black Poets Lean South, are definitely blade poems. The first begins, what if we'd had a bullet for the forehead of every bigot? The second poem, Dancing with Anger, is an intentional rant about violence against Black women. I conclude by telling the brother who gave me a book on anger management, quote, I wonder what might happen if the things that make me angry made you angry too. If the core of rage is pain, then I often write poetry when I am hurting. For the reading last week, I wanted to share some of the poems I've written this month, but I worried they were too sad, something I've heard fairly often from editors in the children's publishing industry. But with everything people are dealing with right now, why advertise my own unhappiness? I have largely been protected from the impact of the pandemic. I'm an introvert. I enjoy solitude and staying at home. I'm one of the privileged professionals who can work remotely and avoid risk of exposure. I entered quarantine last spring with decades of experience managing my mental health, yet I still struggled. Here's a poem I wrote for young readers in 2018. Self-care. Some days it's okay to eat cupcakes instead of kale, to pull on stretchy pants and a hoodie, curl up on the sofa and watch online videos of baby goats prancing in pajamas. It's okay to curl into your pillow when there's no one else to hold and let your tears soak the foam. Then order a large 3-topping pizza and finish that pint of coffee toffee bar crunch without anybody's help. Other days, you can go for a long run, hit the gym, or walk in the park. Find a body of water, breathe deep lungfuls of fresh air, see a matinee by yourself, put on your cute clothes, take a selfie, have a salad with your slice, doodle in your journal, pet a dog you don't own, see the beauty in small things, see the beauty in yourself, even as you don your armor to make it through another day. And the second poem I wrote last year during the pandemic. I am not okay. I am not okay. I am not who I want to be. I am flirting with denial. I am smothering my rage. I am biting through the bit. I am grieving without tears. I am sugaring my sorrow. I am burrowing without blankets. I am losing myself in my skin. I am mourning my lost potential. I am regretting my life choices. I am indulging my worst habits. I am overanalyzing my oppression. I am zooming out of focus. I am withering on the vine. I am hoarding my solitude. I am donating my guilt. I am dreading each blank page. I am dreaming of a shoulder to cry on. I am sitting with my discomfort. I am running out of hope. I am uneasy with others' optimism. I am embarrassed by my selfishness. I am drifting in a sea of self-pity. I am too tired to shrug. But at least I am not numb. I am not defeated. I am still writing, and I will keep on keeping on until I am okay again. Both poems, though different in tone, end with the assurance that adversity can be overcome. That's been the case in my own life, but I know it's not true for everyone. In some ways, it's easier to share poems about the murder of Breonna Taylor than it is to share poems about my own depression. This poem, Slumber Somewhere, was inspired by Danez Smith's epic poem, Summer Somewhere. Somewhere, a sun. Below, girls black and dazzling as galaxies beat the sun-softened asphalt with ropes. Their feet dance with fury and fly without feathers. Plastic barrettes bounce, beads click and clap at the end of braids, left loose to swing about shoulders unburdened by grief, an extension of bodies that are free to just be. At night they slumber, limbs still and heavy upon the cool sheets. Stars puncture the dark heavens above the slivered moon, blanketing them in blackness as comforting as the womb. Bullets perforate their dreams, legs twitch, prepare for flight, then still once more. I say their names when I pray. May they lay their heads upon soft pillows and wake at dawn alive. The next poem is one that I have written for NaPoWriMo, and it doesn't yet have a title. Today, I tried something new, but didn't do it very well. I signed up for a class and withdrew hours before it began. Retreat, my heart whispered. Retreat. But I knew that one day indoors meant I would miss the magnolia at its frothy peak, and the tulip's perfect bowl would collapse before I felt fit to face the world again. So I pushed myself forward and found the earth bore my weight without complaint. I was not the burden I imagined myself to be. For years, I didn't talk about my depression in public, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't think my symptoms were severe enough to warrant mentioning. Having anxiety and depression means I often go months without even recognizing that I feel blue. The persistent poking means I get up at the same time every day, make my bed, tidy the apartment, keep the fridge full of mostly healthy food, and check my never-ending to-do list to make sure I stay on task. It's only when I let myself slow down that I realize something's wrong. With 3 books currently in production, the last couple of months were ridiculously busy for me. I didn't schedule many gigs for April, and that meant I finally had the time to grieve my cousin Laura, who took her own life at the end of February. Until my cousin's death, I was blessed not to have lost a loved one during the pandemic. Most of my family lives in Canada, and I assumed they would be safe up there. The risk was here in the United States, where a callous and inept federal response was endangering millions of people and members of my community in particular. I coped with the stress of the pandemic by relying on ritual, rhythm, and routine. I continued to do what I knew I needed to do: read, write, exercise, pray, and connect with friends. I didn't cry, however, and that worried me. I was perpetually enraged by the killing of Black people reported on the nightly news. I felt overjoyed by each bird I spied feasting at the feeder I hung from my deck. I panicked when my inhaler failed to ease the tightness in my chest and made me suspect I had contracted the virus. But despite everything happening in the world around me, I didn't grieve. I didn't fall on the bed and sob into my pillow, which is what I ordinarily do at least 2 or 3 times a year. My cousin struggled with depression for most of her life due to the trauma she endured as a child. Her suicide was devastating, yet I didn't cry when I heard the sad news. The next day, I spoke with her sister Bethany, who is one of my closest friends. And when the time came to end our Zoom call, the dam broke, freeing the tears I hadn't been able to summon for so many months. There was something about having to say goodbye that triggered the flood. I didn't get to say goodbye to Laura, just as so many of us have had to let go of loved ones from a distance because of the pandemic. I haven't written any poems for my cousin, but she was one of the biggest supporters of my work, so I dedicated my next novel to her. The Witch's Apprentice. Michelle, it's done. It should be coming out early next year. And the dedication will read, "For Laura and all who have passed from one realm to another, we love you, we release you, we remember you." I'd like to conclude this part of my presentation by revisiting that question asked by the elderly white man in Pennsylvania. How do you remain hopeful? Author Gayatri Sethi shared a meme on Instagram the other day that featured a quote by abolitionist Mariam Kaba. It had just 4 words: hope is a discipline. I found a recent interview Kaba gave to The Intercept and wanted to share her powerful words with you this evening. When I would feel overwhelmed by what was going on in the world, I would just say to myself, hope is a discipline. It's less about how you feel and more about the practice of making a decision every day that you're still going to put one foot in front of the other, that you're still going to get up in the morning and you're still going to struggle. It's work to be hopeful. It's not like a fuzzy feeling. You have to actually put in energy, time, and you have to be clear-eyed and you have to hold fast to having a vision. It's a hard thing to maintain, but it matters to have it, to believe that it's possible to change the world. We don't live in a predetermined, predestined world where like nothing we do has an impact. No, that's not true. Change is in fact constant, right? Octavia Butler teaches us. We're constantly changing, we're constantly transforming. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily good or bad, it just is. That's always the case. And so because that's true, we have an opportunity at every moment to push in a direction that we think is actually a direction towards more justice. Let's just do what we can, where we are, within our capacity, to the best of our abilities. Kaba explains that she first heard a nun talking about hope as a discipline and then couldn't get the idea out of her mind. It's been occupying my thoughts as well. I try to make sure I get 10,000 steps in every day. I have a daily exercise regimen. I have a sweet tooth, but diabetes runs in my family, so I'm careful to track my A1C. When I need to finish a novel, I turn off the TV and make sure I produce 1,000 words a day. I am not Pollyanna, but I am disciplined. I think what I'm trying to do in my poetry, in all of my writing really, is to be honest about how I'm feeling while leaving the door open for hope. I think that committing myself to a discipline of hope would mean making space for it every day, searching for things that make me feel hopeful, and when I can't find them, generating hope within myself. Artists wouldn't create if we didn't have hope that things could change, because art doesn't only reflect what's real, it shows us what's possible. I'll close by sharing 3 more poems. The first is from Say Her Name. The second was included in American Phoenix, but I pulled it before publication, and it will be published as a picture book from Little Brown in 2023. And the last is a poem I wrote in response to the mass shooting in Atlanta that included 6 Asian American women victims. We shall overcome. Don't let the beauty of this world lose its allure. Remember, even roses can climb walls. We have been designed to overcome. Juneteenth. Black child, you were birthed from a dark, jeweled expanse, far vaster than any womb, but just as holy. Beautiful and blameless, you were caught by careful hands that bathed and baptized you, buttered your skin and oiled your tender head. Strong arms gently rocked you to sleep, held you up to the sun, and cradled you till the fever broke. As intended, you grew to be Black and proud. But there are those in this world who cannot see your worth, and our everlasting love cannot shield you from the harm their malice will inflict. Yet freedom delayed cannot forever be withheld. We need not wait for the good news to reach us from afar. Liberation must be earned, seized, claimed. So be a worker, be a warrior, be a witness. Dance, demand, and testify. Never forget it was hope that birthed you. Never forget that you are deeply loved. And winter is ending. I wake up still seething, only to find even the sky is white. It's spitting flecks of ice at my window, but I won't be menaced by the climate in this country. All week, I've been trying to break my own body so it can bear the pain that's sure to come. I learned long ago to be wary of whiteness. You see the snowflake, I brace for the avalanche. White as the foam ringing a rabid dog's mouth, the crest of the tsunami's calamitous first wave. For us, it is anything but innocence, anything but peace. Later in the day, I go out into the wind and let its gusts cleanse me as it wipes all traces of white from the sky. The spring sun nearly blinds me, and I laugh behind my mask as I lean into the gale, knowing that this long winter is ending. All right. So we are almost at the writing section of my presentation. So again, if you don't yet have something to write with, please gather that for yourself now. So A Place Inside of Me is the book that I'm going to do a read aloud from, and then we'll do a poetry writing activity. I was really lucky that A Place Inside of Me, it took me 20 years to find an editor, but when I did find Grace Kendall, she really didn't want very many changes. We rearranged the order of some of the stanzas, and we did remove one line. So I'm showing you that line here. There is anger inside of me, a fury deep down inside of me that is sharp enough to slice through air, flesh, bone, and concrete like a raging hailstorm of bullets. That line got cut. Some of you who follow my blog will know that I did a series of posts called, the middle post on Dear Martin was called No More Becky Books. I was frustrated that African Americans were writing books about police brutality that seemed to center white girls instead of Black girls, which seemed odd since Black women founded the Black Lives Matter movement. And so you can imagine my reaction when I saw this in the initials proofs for A Place Inside of Me. Absolutely not. So that did not make it into the final edition of the book, which I am going to read for you now. So I will stop sharing that. And let's see, I think I can just do it again. All right. If you cannot see a place inside of me, I'm hoping somebody will unmute and let me know. We did see your friend. You can see it. Excellent. Thank you. So I hope it's the full screen as well. So A Place Inside of Me, as I said, was a poem I wrote 20 years ago. Noah Denman was brought on as illustrator. This is her first picture book. I could not believe her illustrations. And when I saw them last April, before the book came out in July, I said to her, you are going to win the Caldecott Honor Award at the very least. And sure enough, she did. But it was also kind of frustrating because in a year where Black Lives Matter protests were all over the globe, our book only got 2 reviews out of a potential 6 for the major kidlit review outlets. And when your book doesn't get reviewed, a lot of libraries don't know about it, and it doesn't end up on the radar of awards committee members. So I'm really glad that folks did know about the book. And thank you, Michelle, for being one of the 2 reviews in Hornbook. So A Place Inside of Me, I dedicated to Zion and all the children who missed the hand they used to hold. Trust that you will laugh again and love again once your heart has had time to heal. And Zion, for those of you that don't know, is the nephew of a Tatiana Jefferson. They were playing video games in Fort Worth, Texas, when a police officer arrived at the house, didn't announce himself, shot and killed a Tatiana through the window. There is a place inside of me, a space deep down inside of me where all my feelings hide. They wait there in the darkness, a knot of electric emotion, seething, sizzling, burning, until I find the strength to reach inside. There is joy inside of me, a happiness deep down inside of me that glows bright and warm as the sun and shines delight on everything I see. There is sorrow inside of me, a sadness deep down inside of me that is cold and dark as a watery grave at the bottom of the sea. There is fear inside of me, a terror deep down inside of me that stalks me like a sinister shadow and seeps like poison into my dreams. There is anger inside of me, a fury deep down inside of me that is sharp enough to slice through air, flesh, bone, and concrete. And yet, there is hunger inside of me, a yearning deep down inside of me that refuses to be silenced or bound with chains and insists on being free. There is pride inside of me, no shame deep down inside of me, for I know how long and hard we have struggled, and against all odds, my people have emerged strong, triumphant, and beautiful. Now, I could go on and on about each illustration for hours, but I always try to stop at this one at least, because I love the mix of people that Noah has included, that children might be presenting on in their social studies class. In the top right-hand corner, of course, we have Maya Angelou. And if we go clockwise, then we have Malcolm X and Louis Armstrong and Mae Jemison, Jackie Robinson, Dr. King, Beyonce, and the Supremes. And then I also love what Noah did with this illustration. So some of the faces here are actually members of her family. And then as you go back, sort of on the rows, the farther you look back into the picture, you can see she's painted some African ancestors as well. There is peace inside of me, a calm deep down inside of me that flows through my soul like a tranquil stream and hushes my whispering doubts. There is compassion inside of me, a tenderness deep down inside of me that tries to heal the wounds of the past and to forgive in spite of the lingering pain. There is still hope inside of me, a promise deep down inside of me that I will use my life to help others and they will help me in return. For there is love inside of me, true love deep down inside of me. I am in love with my people, all people, plus trees, sparrows, sunlight, and the rain that falls like a blessing from above. And when I look inside of me, to that place deep down inside of me, I remember to love myself most of all. So big congratulations to Noah for winning the Caldecott Honor Award. So now let's see, I need to share my screen again. This has been working so well, please let this work. Except I don't see my PowerPoint presentation. So let me try that. Okay, no, I can't do that. Sorry, if you just give me a second, see if I can. Okay, that worked. Here we go. All right, so our writing activity today is designed to celebrate joy. So I talked about making hope a discipline. I think we also have to think about how we make space for joy in our lives. My good friend and neighbor Cosby A. Cabrera said she's reading a book by Ross Gay, and I think it's called The Book of Delights. It's another Black poet. And he decided that every day he was going to write down, make a list of things that brought him delight or joy. And then he wrote poems about them. So what we are going to do, let me find this. We are going to start with a warm up, word association. Some of you have probably heard about word association. You will need a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. I'm asking you to write the numbers 1 to 10 down your margin. Wait for the prompt, which is on the next slide, and then write down whatever pops into your head. So the idea is for you to write as quickly as possible. Try not to censor yourself. Don't worry about your spelling. You don't have to share your words if you don't want to. You're certainly not handing it in to be graded. So this is just really a fun way to get you warmed up. You have 60 seconds. I've got my clock here, my stopwatch. So if you get more than 10 words and there's still time left, just keep writing until I say, please stop. And then we'll have to figure out how we're going to share. I suspect the chat might be the easiest way, but maybe we can also find a way to unmute. All right, so you understand I'm going to give you one word. And when you see that word, whatever pops into your head, just write it down, write it down, write it down. Okay. Any questions? All right, you have 60 seconds to write down as many words as you can that you associate or connect with joy. What makes you happy? In my book, the boy is happy when he's playing basketball outside with his friends. For me, it's walking by the lake, for sure. Watching sparrows feed from the suet cages on my balcony. You can think about foods that bring you joy. There is definitely going to be some pizza tonight for me. Okay, that's 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds left. Maybe people bring you joy, places, holidays. If joy were a color, what color would it be? If joy had a scent, what would it smell like? All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. Time is up. All right, so let me figure out how we can do this. I would like to see the chat, I think. That's one option. Okay. So if anybody would like, oh, here we go. Wow. A window, a view, sunlight, camellias, magnolias. Yeah, very nice. Thank you. Anyone else like to share? Neighbors, happiness, red cardinals. Absolutely. I wake up and hear cardinals right outside my window. Music, books, arts. Thank you, Brian. My son, nice. Jasmine's books, sunrises. This is where it's going to start getting fast. Brunches. Yes, I miss brunch so much. Girlfriends, laughing, trees, hugs, biscuits. Amen. Birds singing, music, family, love, dancing, ocean spirals, my kid, laughter, beginning readers, spring breeze, mangoes, thank you, Carol Ann, happy cornbread, yes, Michelle, children, women, friends, yellow, water, ocean, a perfect line of poetry, tea, coffee, game nights, music, springtime, quiet mornings, bread, sunlight, ebullience, unbearable lightness, wild, sun, brightness, vibration, heart, CCBB, quilting, music, YouTube, ramen, Thanksgiving, Moscato, purple, Chloe and Hallie, Jasmine, home, yellow sun, family, water falling over the rocks, the scent of jasmine, amen, Letitia, no police, no ice, books, 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 hugs, belly rubs, the mountains, violets, wine, family, sun, water, the smell of Italy, ooh, coffee and diesel and a glass of red wine, waves and shorelines, tennis, smile, peace, teeth, love, hearts, trees, sunlight, energy, God, church, smile, hummingbirds, yes. Cheese, yes. Love, beaches, sunrise, puppy breath, ooh, panda cam, light, space, nature, donuts, yes. Sarah, peace, flourishing. All right. That is fantastic. Woo. Mace featuring Frankie Beverly. All right. Red velvet cake. Yes. Aretha. Yes. Nice. All right. Folks have got some awesome things listed here. Let me check to make sure. How am I doing for time? Okay. Pretty good. All right. So now, if I were doing this in person, I would have written down all of the student responses that they shared, and then we would have on the board sort of like a word cloud, and then you have a whole bunch of words, a vocabulary essentially for the writing activity we're going to do next. Were there any questions or comments? Nope, okay, I'm gonna keep going then. So you'll remember from A Place Inside of Me. Oh, thank you for sharing your list, Andrea. Your new glasses. I need some new glasses. And please, for a lemon popsicle. So you remember from the book, there is joy inside of me, a happiness deep down inside of me that glows bright and warm as the sun. So there are a few similes that I use in this book. And now we are going to talk a little bit more about similes. I call them the tool of the trade when I am teaching poetry workshops online, which I've been doing a lot more lately. I always stop in the midst of a workshop and say, let's add a new tool to our toolbox. And obviously you don't just use a simile for poetry. You can use similes in any kind of writing, really. A simile compares two things using like or as. An example would be your smile sweet as cotton candy. You can use similes to enhance your writing. Fill in the blanks for the following words, and then try adding a simile to your next poem. Once you get used to seeing similarities between things, it won't be too hard to develop metaphors for your writing as well. So I took this activity from my writing workbook, which I self-published. It's called Find Your Voice. If there are any educators, or if there's anybody really who wants a free copy of the PDF, just email me, info@zettaelliott.com. Happy to send it to you. So I'm going to give you some prompts, and I'm going to ask you to finish them off in a simile. Sweet as. Give me some things that are sweet. Give me some sugar. Sweet as. Honeysuckle, nice. Sweet as maple syrup, molasses, chocolate cake, a kiss, fresh strawberries, blueberry pie, regret, interesting. Bubblegum, sugar, All right. Oh, grandniece Malaya, cherries, forgiveness, nice. Oh, a fall fig from my tree. Sweet as the breeze, honey from a honeycomb, baby's toes, peaches. Excellent. All right, I'm going to move us on to the next one. Hot like. What's something that's hot? Hot like, ooh, my temper, burning. Mama's anger, The August sun, serrano chili, fire, red pepper, a fever, nice. Spicy ramen, Colombia, sriracha, jalapenos, hot chocolate, I like it. Metal in the forge, wow, nice, Ebony. Tamales, yes, Colombia in July. All right, how about soft? Soft as a hug. Okay, a few hot ones. Soft as baby's toes, fur, a puppy's ears, rabbit's ears. Ooh, they went so fast. A marshmallow, a flannel gown. Let me get back to that one. Washed 100 times. Soft as my mama's words when I'm down. Beautiful. Soft as a mother's love. A pillow, puppy cuddles, cotton balls, forgiveness. Nice. Feather. Oops, where am I again? Concealed tears, kitten belly, Millie's white fur, lamb's wool, a breeze, a baby's blanket. Nice. How about sharp? Something that is sharp. Sharp as broken glass. Nice. Someone's tongue, definitely. A knife, good. A razor, unkind words, attack, a pointed word, morning coffee, a witty comment, spice, a parent's disappointment. Wow. Silence. Sharp as a tack when you're dressed really nice. Sharp as quick wit. Ooh, Michelle, stank eye. The end of friendship. Nice, Crystal. Wow. An arrowhead. Someone's gaze, right? Cut eye can kill. All right. How about gentle? Gentle as a lamb. Gentle as a whisper. The breeze, unending peace, a feather, an encouraging word, a breeze smile, soft as gentle as a soft kiss, hands, a lullaby, a baby's touch, a caress, a sigh. Ooh, hummingbird wings, nice, Laura. Handling a sick baby, floating on your back in a warm jacuzzi. Ooh, a mama's caress, butterfly wings, beautiful, the night air. Lovely. All right. Now we are ready to turn our vocabulary words and our tool of the trade into poetry. So I'm going to close this for a second. Let's make a poem about joy. These are some examples I came up with for some of the students I was working with who are fairly young. But it just gives you a sense of how you can make simple stanzas, string them together. And of course, I wanted to end with an uplifting note. Joy warms my heart like a hug from my grandma. Joy is golden like daffodils dozing in spring sunshine. Joy shines like bubbles glistening in the summer sun. Joy is clear as the voices of my people singing hymns on Sunday. Joy makes every burden easier to bear. Your turn. All right, so why don't I give you, shall we say 2 minutes, which is obviously not a lot of time. And this is just a rough draft. You can just, take a chance, start a poem, just maybe write a few stanzas. You can figure out later if you want to put them together. So I will try to sit here for a couple of minutes while you write, and then I'll ask for volunteers. And I guess people could type it in the chat, or if we wanted to have volunteers unmute, I would be very happy to have a sort of open mic and folks could share their joy poem. Keeping in mind, it's a draft, right? It's very hard to write something on the spot. Excellent. Okay. You can raise your hands. Great. Okay. Maybe I can actually stop doing this. Okay, that is almost 2 minutes. I see some folks are still writing. Give you a little bit more time, and then if there's anyone who would like to share, you can raise your hand and or unmute and just say, I'll do it.
I'll share mine.
Excellent.
I have two short ones. Joy is a conversation that runs deep into the night with the friend I've known and loved for 40 plus long years. And joy is a campfire with my Girl Scouts after a pandemic year of only seeing them in little black boxes.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Michelle.
Nice.
Some s'mores around the fire. I can just imagine, yes, I won't imagine all the mosquitoes and everything else, but those s'mores, yum. Anyone else willing to share?
I'll share mine.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Joy is drinking sweet tea in the summer sun. Joy is imagining the broom handle as a mic stand in front of an audience of grass and trees. Joy is hope. Joy is love. Joy is me.
Ooh, beautiful.
Lovely.
I love that. Practice in front of the broomstick. So you'll be ready when you're on stage. Love it. Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
I can share.
Great.
Joy is Malaya and BB, her little sister that's not born yet, on this planet, in my life at this time. Joy is YouTube. Joy is purple. Joy is audacious. Joy is Black women making music. Joy is unapologetic.
Joy is unapologetic. Yes. Shout out for purple, my favorite color. Thank you. Always makes me happy. Let's see. Janet has her hand up.
I do. I'm sorry. I'm kind of on the move, but I do have one. Joy is the bird song spilling in my window. Joy is the coffee bubbling. It's ready. Joy is my children finding roller skates as I tie my laces and roll outside to play.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
Do it, Mom. Thank you so much. Skylar, I see a hand up.
Yes, my friend. And happy spring and happy Friday to everybody. I like this little ditty that I wrote, so I wrote it down even more. Joy is a window, a view, a walk. Joy is a walk, a view, a window. Joy is a view, joy is a window. Joy is sunlight, camellia, magnolia, camellia. Joy is sunlight, view, our neighbors, a window. And happy spring.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Skylar. Perfect pandemic poem. Love it. I can't see everybody's window, so there may be some hands that I'm missing. So if you just want to unmute and start, that's also okay. Any other volunteer poets?
There are lots in the chat.
Are there? Oh, thank you. Oh, Anastasia. Joy is baking in an oven under a sun with good friends near midnight. Joy is like the sound when Reed gives chase to grumpy cats, suddenly kittens. Joy is laughter, purple and resplendent, falling like water into an ocean as clear as ice. Watch out. Joy bursts into my heart with the first sound of the kora, transporting me to another place before returning me renewed, gently back to earth. Enola, wow. That plays Senegal by any chance? Thank you. Ellen, joy is cousin to anger. They are both so loud, blazing like the morning glint off of a gong. In the aftermath of sound, you feel it in the body. Toes dipped in sunlight. Ooh, that's beautiful. Let's see, did I miss anyone else's? These are fantastic. And look, you just did that in like 3 minutes. Poetry is for everyone. That is what I hope everyone takes away from this activity. Poetry is for everyone. And I have to say that one of the reasons I didn't call myself a poet for so long is because poetry often feels like a very elite and select and exclusive club. And sometimes I think there are poets who write for other poets. They're not necessarily writing for everyday people, but I absolutely want as many people to come in as possible. So I thank all of you for welcoming me this evening and for joining in and engaging and participating. And I think I'll turn it back over to Nicole and Michelle, and maybe we have time for questions, I think.
Yes, thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing, as were all the poems that came through. And we have lots of time for questions. So I'm going to turn it over to members of Team Baker, Liz and Christine, and they'll be moderating the questions. So please feel free to enter questions in the chat, and you can actually keep raising your hands, and we can certainly go off mic as well.
So we do have one question that was emailed to Michaela, and I will pull it up here. So Betty would like to know, when and why did you establish your own imprint, Rosetta Press? Has it fulfilled your goals?
That's an interesting question. So when I first started self-publishing, I had so much material on my hard drive. I had just published Bird, that came out in 2008, and it won a whole bunch of prizes and awards. And I just thought, you know, editors are going to be dying to have all my other stories, and then no one was interested in anything. And my cousin Bethany told me about print-on-demand technology, and initially I scoffed at it and looked down my nose and was like, oh, I'm not going to be one of those people, you know, hustling books out the trunk of the car. But then another friend of mine, Pam Booker, had self-published a book, and it was beautiful. And she was an intelligent, you know, talented artist that I admired. So I did initially 2 books, my memoir, Stranger in the Family, and A Wish After Midnight, a young adult novel. And then I just started looking at the rest of my material. And once I realized it really wasn't difficult or expensive to self-publish, I thought it made sense for me to have sort of an organizing vision and principle to guide what I was publishing. And I was also thinking about, you know, the Combahee River Collective Statement and Kitchen Table Women of Color Press and all these other amazing Black feminists in the past who had started their own presses, and they had a vision and they had a mandate. And I thought, yeah, you know, I do too. I've written all of these stories, and when I look at them critically, I see that I'm trying to do something very specific. And I, you know, would sometimes have librarians say, "Oh, we like your books, but we can only have hardcover books in the library." And I understand that. But for me, I wanted to promote home libraries, and that meant having affordable books. And so paperback books, I could make a $7 book, an $8 book, a $10 book. So, you know, I just started making a list of the things that were most important to me. And, you know, one was to center kids of color who have been marginalized and misrepresented. And the other was to make sure I had a steady supply of a wide range of stories, and to make sure that they were affordable so people could build home libraries. And when I moved from Lulu, a print-on-demand site, to Create Space, which is owned by Amazon, they give you the option of adding a logo to the back of your book. So I know some people feel as though that's deceptive and that there are self-published authors who are trying to pose as publishers in order to get around the stigma and discrimination against indie authors. And I am not trying to do that. I tell people, you know, I have an imprint, which is to say, I have an organizing principle, but I self-publish. I am not a publisher. I don't accept submissions and I don't publish other people's work. I still have on my hard drive right now 20 picture books and 3 or 4 novels that I don't know if my agent will be able to sell. Probably not, certainly not all of them. So then it helps me, it's empowering to me at least to know that I have the option of using print on demand technology to make the books myself. Has it been what I hoped it would be? I think so. I think so. I probably hoped, you know, when I first started self-publishing in 2008, I probably hoped that indie bookstores would be more supportive of indie authors, and that hasn't panned out, and I think that's unfortunate. But we now have Bookshop, which is, you know, set up as an alternative to Amazon, and Bookshop carries, you know, almost all of my indie books, indie titles. So I think there are more opportunities for people to support indie authors. I wish more professors were like Michelle and some of the other scholars that I work with who talk about the publishing industry, talk about the reason why people self-publish, why it's important to see self-publishing as an act of resistance instead of something that has to do with vanity. It's really not about vanity for so many people of color, especially for Black authors, certainly not for me.
Would anyone like to unmute themselves and ask a question?
I have a quick comment, Christine, and you know, I know there are lots of librarians and future librarians on, and sometimes this is about policy because I know that some libraries have policies that you can only carry, they can only carry books or buy books that have 2 reputable reviews, whatever, you know, that means. And so, you know, we're counting on this next generation of librarians to get in there and change policies like that, because there's lots of excellent work happening with self-publishing, and you just have to have the critical eye to know that it's good work. And so I think those policies are pretty silly. So change the policy.
Thank you, Michelle, and acknowledge that, you know, you can't say, we know that the traditional publishing industry, you know, has decades of exclusionary practices. We know that people of color and people with disabilities and LGBTQ folks have been excluded and shut out, and they aren't represented among publishing professionals. You can't say all of that. You can't acknowledge it and know that it's true and then say, but we're not going to support people who have had to find alternatives to the traditional publishing industry. That just doesn't make sense. And it's very easy, I think, to get caught up in celebration mode, and we should certainly celebrate books that are traditionally published. And I have books that are traditionally published, and I do hope that they will be embraced and celebrated, but I can't say that they are substantially better than a lot of the other books that I self-publish. So if you find an author and you like their work, see what else they have. I know people are anxious for the 3rd Dragon book to come out, and I'm like, well, in the meantime, you could read, you know, the City Kids series, which is self-published. And I think that there are a lot of people who wouldn't do that. They only want the books that come from Random House or from HarperCollins or from Simon & Schuster. And, you know, that means you're giving your vote of support to gatekeepers who don't look like me, don't come from my culture, my community. And that's just not right.
Seven, can you hear me? This is Seisha.
Yes, hi, Seisha.
Okay, hi. I can't do my video, so I'll just talk. But one of the things that concerns me, I have worked in a number of libraries, and I've never had those policies. So those must be new policies or something. I mean, we didn't have them in library school. I'm not familiar with that, but I do want to support the comment that Michelle made, you know, and the thing that I fight, in fact, sometimes people don't want to hear me talk about that, but we really have a lot of control. And even if a library has a policy of only this or that, there's usually, you can usually buy, out of $50 or something, you can buy those books. You can find that information. You can talk to, your neighborhood community club or sorority or whatever, and ask them for $100 or $50 or something to help the library buy that. So I think if there's a message we want to get out to librarians and teachers and parents and whomever, as Michelle said, and I think the person before after her, is just take the step. I mean, this is a time when we have to be brave, and we know what we need to do. But it saddens me to hear that, because I'd never heard that. I'd never, with any of the libraries where I worked, and that's just sort of shocking to me. So anyway, just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Oh, and I love this. I'm so glad I got invited. Thank you so much, Nicole, and you, Zetta. This is wonderful.
And an early happy birthday to you, Seisha. Another birthday.
Have a question?
I have a question.
Hi, Elisa.
Thank you. I'm curious about your process when it comes to putting together an anthology and then looking at a poem and then seeing a poem that can be illustrated as a picture book. Is that something that happens after the poem is on the page? Is it something that sort of just like evolves as you're working? Is it something that happens in collaboration through your agent or through other folks that you write with? I'm curious about how you think about that as like a standalone text on the page versus something that can be illustrated through an artist's lens.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to Juneteenth. And so when I was writing, when we first went into quarantine in the middle of March last year, I knew I needed to start writing quickly. So I started doing Poem a Day mid-March, and then I did it for April. So by the end of April, I had about 50 or 60 poems, and then I was teaching classes. So part of it is that I'm writing for different audiences. So I know that sometimes I'm very specifically asked to write a poem. Janet Wong and Sylvia Bardell asked me to write a poem for K-2. And I was like, I don't write poems for K-2. And then I looked at Say Her Name and I was like, well, there are a couple of these that could work for second graders. So I tried to write something very simple and I sent it to them and they liked it. With Juneteenth, that was a poem that I had started and stopped and started and stopped. And then when I finally sat down and finished it, it was going in a different direction. And I had included it. I sent it to my editor and I had included it in that. And just as I was reviewing the manuscript, I just thought, this poem is really addressing the Black child. And so because it is explicitly addressing a child, it would make sense for it to be illustrated. And I do think that in the past few years, more publishers have been interested in acquiring poems and publishing them as poems instead of trying to turn them into stories. So my first picture book, Bird, the publisher promoted it as a book in verse, and that is not poetry at all. But they, just cut the sentences up and then say, oh, it's a poem, which is just a gimmick. But it's also, true that a lot of reluctant readers do find poetry more welcoming when they see it on the page. So I can't say that I have a process necessarily. I think sometimes I've been doing this long enough that I know what my agent is likely to be able to sell and what she's not. I wrote a poem over Christmas called In the Dark, and it is sort of a poem about a child who's overcoming their fear of the dark, but it's very explicitly also about fighting anti-Blackness. And so we just got our first rejection. And so I suspect we're going to get quite a few more. So that might be a poem that I end up self-publishing. Sometimes I think I know, and sometimes, you just put it out there and try and see what happens. Sorry, that's as good as I can get an answer that I can give.
I have a question. I can't find the hand to raise. This is Monique from Facebook. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Okay. I have a suggestion. your book on mental illness. Do you have a book on mental illness?
I do not.
Oh, I thought you did. Because hospitals, well, children's hospitals, they would love it if you wrote a book or poetry on mental illness or anxiety. I have type 1 diabetes, and I wrote a chapbook on growing up with type 1 diabetes. I was
Wow.
diagnosed at age 10. My
Wow.
doctor, who's an endocrinologist, purchased a stack of them for his staff as well as his patients.
Right. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think there have been some partnerships that I know of self-published books that are done in partnership with medical professionals for sure. And that is something that a corporate publisher probably would not have that much interest in, thinking that it's a very limited market and not a good way for them to make money. So that's a great opportunity for community-based publishing. Yeah, to step in and fill a gap. Yeah, that's great. Congratulations.
You're welcome.
So Zetta, there are a couple questions in the chat. One is from Stacy Collins, and Stacy wants to know, where do you see hope being written for Black joy in youth books in ways that aren't only speculative or only vis-a-vis pain? And do you have any favorites?
So I am sort of ashamed to admit this, but I don't read kidlit. So it's pretty hard for me to answer that question. I mostly read adult lit. I read some young adult, but I don't read a whole lot of picture books for sure. Certainly Derek Barnes has been putting out books that are celebrating Black boy joy. That's hard to say. Do you have any titles that you would recommend, Stacy? Or any titles that you want us to be wary of, maybe? Or if anyone else wants to answer that question, they can feel free. Legend Born. Oh, so let me go back to your question. Legend Born. Where do you see hope being written for Black joy in youth books in ways that aren't only speculative or only vis-a-vis pain? Are you sure you would say Legend Born? So her mother is killed and she starts looking for this medieval cult. And she also finds out she has ancestral magical powers. Yeah, that's interesting. Going Down Home with Daddy. Oh, thank you, Bree. That's a great title. Kelly Starling Lyons. I Am Enough, right? That's Grace Byers, I think. New Kid, Class Act, Root Magic. Oh, I've been wanting to look at Root Magic. Renee Watson writes books full of Black girl joy for middle grades and young adult audiences. Absolutely. The hope feels very immediate to me. Okay, so Stacy, you and I should talk about that book. Yes, to Renee's book. But does she find agency in herself? Yeah, I'm looking forward to the sequel of that. Love is a Revolution is amazing, Ebony says. And Crystal reminds us that Edie Campbell has a great list over at Crazy Quilt Edie. Thank you for putting that in the chat. All right, Bree, we're going to talk about Legend Born. There was a Twitter chat about it, but I can't say anything on Twitter because I'm not trying to get dragged all over again. Amadou Zoo, a picture book. All right. The Augusta Baker Book Club. Is that real or aspirational? Is that?
It's aspirational, but it's a possibility.
Hey, all right. You just have to swear an oath of silence and secrecy that you won't publish anyone's remarks about anyone else's book. And Bree, it doesn't take a genius. All right, Bemi has a new book, that's right. Good. Thank you, everybody. I apologize. I know that's a bit of a disgrace that I don't read Kidlit, but I don't as much as I should.
We will go back and review all of these wonderful suggestions, and we can send them all out. So, because this is being recorded.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
I have a question, if it's okay.
Go ahead, Bree.
Okay. So Zetta, I was wondering if you have any thoughts. Right now, a big conversation that's happening in the UK around books is celebrity books for children. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts. I know that you've lectured in the UK and you've done presentations in the UK. And I don't know if you noticed at all going into any bookstores, but most of the books that are put out in the front are books that are either collaborations with celebrities or authored solely by celebrities. So I was wondering if you had, it's not something that we talk about a lot here in the US, I guess, but I kind of think we should be having some of those same conversations, just because when I think about folks who are mid-market authors, where the budgets for marketing and that sort of thing goes, it often is not just like the big names in children's literature or in publishing, but those celebrity deals that come through. I mean, Simon & Schuster has a mess on their hands right now as well. So just if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it is such a different context here in the US than in the UK. And I would say here in the US, I know I've heard some folks complain about celebrity books, and I really haven't had a problem with them because I feel as though celebrities have an existing base. And so publishers really don't need to be spending a whole lot of marketing money because the base already exists. And that money that they are going to make from sales, right, they could be putting into the mid-list and the other authors who are writing quiet books. Like there used to be that kind of distribution within publishing, and I don't think it happens anymore. And I certainly, a few years ago, the agent I was working with said she spoke to somebody at one of the big five, and they said they were only looking for picture books from social media influencers and celebrities. And that is a problem, obviously. And so I think what you have perhaps in the UK, Bree, you know that that market much better than I do. I think publishers over there have not done the work of developing and finding marginalized writers and making them feel welcome and helping them find their way and navigate the publishing industry over there. So then it is not acceptable for them to simply opt for celebrities who already have the exposure and the visibility and the base. And so again, they have to do relatively little work. So I don't have a problem with celebrity books if they're done hand in hand with development of everyday, ordinary writers, emerging writers, existing writers. We want writers to have long careers. And so that seems to me something that isn't necessarily happening in publishing right now. But yeah, in the UK, I think that's not acceptable at all. And I don't honestly understand why it's taking them so long to make progress over there. And the only answer I have for that is lack of will within the publishing industry itself, which is not a surprise, given what British culture is like generally on issues of race. And didn't the Prime Minister just issue a report that says they have no problem with racism anymore? I mean, there's so much going on over there with their issues. So I'm sorry to hear that they're opting to focus on celebrity books as though that's some sign of progress on their part, because it's not. You know what, Michelle, I'm okay with crappy celebrity books. They're written by celebrities. You know, I don't expect them to be outstanding. I feel like there's room for mediocrity within the publishing industry. It's just a problem when other people who are writing really good books, you know, I've been trying to find a way to create an analogy from Daniel Markovitz's notion of superiority versus excellence. And, he's talking about the meritocracy trap, and he's more specifically speaking about universities in the US and how when we think of a model of excellence, excellence is a threshold, and many people at many different moments can cross that threshold. But superiority is about rank, right? We like to rank people. And what ends up happening is that a couple of schools end up being number one, and everybody scrambles to get a degree from Harvard Business School. And it no longer becomes about whether that degree or program actually is offering or generating excellence. And I feel like with Kidlit, something similar is happening, where you end up with, authors being ranked according to superiority. And a sign of superiority is whether or not your book has been on the New York Times bestseller list. And I don't know that that is necessarily an indication of excellence. Clearly, I've critiqued some books that I think are not excellent, that certainly are best-selling books. But then it means I've accepted the fact that I'm sort of a tier 3 writer within the Kidlit economy. So you have at the top, I guess, Jackie and Jason and Kwame, and then you have a whole bunch of other tier 2 authors, and then I'm somewhere in the tier 3. I think maybe you're closer to tier 4. And it no longer becomes about excellence. And I think that's really a problem. Yeah, somebody just put quantity versus quality. So it's really about how many books you can sell. And when you're a Black author, if your book is on the New York Times bestseller list, there's a pretty good chance white people put it there. So then it also becomes, well, are those books that are selling so many copies simply more palatable to a white audience? I don't know. Those are my random thoughts on Daniel Markovitz's notion, but I'm certainly just trying to aim for excellence myself. But I don't mind if there are Black people who are writing so-so books. I just wish that the people who are writing really good books, like if I can't even get my books reviewed, say Her Name got 2 reviews, A Place Inside of Me got 2 reviews. Derek Barnes, his latest book, I Am Every Good Thing, that got 6 starred reviews, and then won absolutely nothing at the Youth Media Awards. Like, how is that possible? How he won the Kirkus Prize twice? So I wish we could have a more complicated and nuanced conversation about Black excellence and who defines it and who determines what is and is not excellent, as opposed to what's popular, as opposed to what's superior, and who's number one and who's not, and all of that. Yeah.
Sherry wants to know, since you don't read Kidlit, what are you reading? What are you currently reading, and what do you have queued up to read next?
Ooh, thank you for that question, Sherry. I am reading The Conductors. The Conductors, and I can't remember the author's first name, but the last name is Glover. And I heard them being interviewed on NPR rather, and it's about a couple who were Underground Railroad conductors, but it's this alternate reality in Philadelphia where folks have magical powers, and she uses star sigils to cast spells, and it's like a murder mystery, and it's sort of really dense and long, but I'm getting to the end of it. And up next, I have Unraveling by Karen Lord. Been looking forward to that for a long time. And what do I have after that? I have a book of poetry that I purchased, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm so sorry, but it was a young woman who did some genealogical research and found her ancestors like about 6 or 8 generations back. And wrote a series of dramatic monologues. I just finished reading Olio by Ty Himba Jess, and I'm using that as a model for an experimental novel in verse that I am trying to write that I started last year, set in central Pennsylvania. And I'm hoping I can get that done maybe this spring, maybe, yeah.
Are there any other questions? We still have some time. All right, so hearing none, just please join me in thanking Zetta for an amazing session. Really wonderful lecture, amazing activity. Just it was just beautifully done. So as I knew it would be. So thank you so very much for joining us. And so just while I have you all before you dash off for your evenings, just want to thank you again so very much for joining us on a Friday evening. We will be posting the recording and the book recommendations and things shortly as soon as we can. So I just put my Twitter handle, it's @Baker Chair. So please tune in, and that's where I will push out all, instead of giving you links, that's where I'll push out that information. And who knows, maybe we'll have an Augusta Baker book club that we can tell you about in the near future. And so just before we end, I want to thank Richland Library here in Columbia in Richland County for being our wonderful and supportive partners for this lecture. And also we will also put up their links. They've been doing the Augusta Baker Dozens Festival, the annual storytelling festival, and we haven't been able to have it live in the last 2 years because of the pandemic, but they did some virtual story times and story readings, story performances today, and please check them out and support our partners in enriching the legacy of Augusta Baker. So with that said, thank you all again. Zetta, it's a pleasure always. And Michelle, thank you. And thanks to Team Baker. So thank you, everyone. We will be back again next year with the 3rd annual Augusta Baker Lecture, and we hope that you will join us again for that. Everyone have a good evening and a great weekend, and thanks for coming.
Thanks for everyone. Take care.